Hello, and welcome to the Dance Physio Podcast, a podcast designed to explore ideas and foster discussion around dancer health and wellness. We're here to challenge the status quo, bridge the gap between dance science and the studio, and help change the landscape of the dance industry for the better. I'm your host, Erica Mayall, a dancer turned physiotherapist who is deeply passionate about leaving the dance world better than I found it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dance Physio Podcast. I am your host, Erica Mayall. I am very excited to be joined by a special guest here today. I have had a couple of requests come in recently with people having questions around auditions and audition season and things they can do to best prepare themselves for auditions, whether that be for summer intensives or professional contracts and things like that. And so I figured I should probably bring in a guest who is much more an expert in this area than I potentially am. So I am thrilled to be joined by Sloan, aka the Brainy Ballerina. Sloan is the founder and CEO of the Brainy Ballerina, and she is a dance educator and career mentor based in Madison, Wisconsin. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Dance from Grand Valley State University and a graduate certificate in nonprofit management from the University of Missouri. Caitlin danced professionally for nearly a decade with companies including Ballet Tucson and Mareck Dance, which was formerly the Missouri Contemporary Ballet. She has served as director of the School of Missouri Contemporary Ballet and on faculty of the Central Indiana Academy of Dance and the School of Madison Ballet. In 2019, Caitlin founded the Brainy Ballerina, a virtual resource providing support and guidance for aspiring ballet dancers. Through one-on-one career mentorship, workshops, and digital resources, her mission is to help dancers gain the skills necessary to build a smart and sustainable career in the dance industry. So welcome to the podcast, Caitlin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we are going to dive into talking about auditions and audition season. But before we get into that, I want to go right back to the very beginning of little Caitlin and sort of what your earliest memories of dance are, how you fell in love with dance, how you ended up in this dance world.
Well, my very first dance class, I was 3 years old, and I was asked to leave because I wasn't listening. And I didn't go back until I was 10 years old. But when I enrolled again in dance classes at 10, it was instant love. I just really took to it. I had tried so many other sports and things, and I was just not an athletic kid in the sense of like doing a sport like that. So dance was just perfect for me, and I moved through the levels pretty quickly in my school. I was in a pre-professional ballet school and caught up with my peers and trained there until I graduated from high school. I went to college for dance and then went straight from there into my professional career.
Wow, that's actually a really fun story in that like you kind of started and then it wasn't necessarily meant to be right from the beginning. But then, yeah, sounds like you maybe knew like right when you returned, when you were a bit older, that was something that you were going to want to pursue or sort of stay within the dance industry. So I know that you, although still teach dance and are a dance educator, you've also transitioned into a little bit more of this like career coach and mentorship type role. And I'm wondering, I think we see a lot in the dance world that people end up in roles that they wish had existed for them. And so people will often end up almost like creating that. And I'm wondering if that's the case in your instance, like whether that was something you really wish that you'd had more support around or more guidance around, or if not, how you actually ended up in this current role that you're in.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like my school as a kid did an incredible job of preparing us for auditions, really logistically. We had to almost rehearse auditions, even when we were auditioning for parts in our productions, like the Nutcracker, Sleeping Beauty, all the different things we did. We still had to wear our number, turn our resume and headshot, go to the audition in our studio. And so we practiced that a lot and went to a lot of summer intensive auditions and did all of that. But what really shocked me when I started going into the professional world was how much more difficult those auditions were, not even from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint than the ones I'd been doing as a kid. And so I guess going back to just how I got into this specific career, I did see a big gap in it, and it kind of started around COVID because I had retired from my professional dance career. I had planned to teach full time. COVID happened. All my classes were canceled. I moved to a new state, so I just really had no dance home, and I was really craving having something to really anchor me in the dance world still. And I had started a sort of different business that was also the Brainy Ballerina, and there's still some iteration of that in my business. It was more printables and worksheets for dancers and dance teachers. Mm-hmm. But in the COVID time and just like getting on social media and talking to dancers, I was realizing how isolated everyone was, of course, but also how lost they were in trying to navigate their careers. And I just realized that there really was a gap for somebody to help dancers figure out the business side of their career, because we do a lot as dance educators, working on technique, working on performance, artistry, all those things. And I know, because I was a school director, I've been a dance teacher for 15 years, like I know how hard it is to find time to talk about career skills as well. Like I would try to make as much as I could in our curriculum to help dancers prepare for that. But there's just a certain point where you have to make decisions when you're trying to schedule with all of their school classes, everything that's going on, their family commitments. And so I really wanted to be a person who could work in tandem with studios and with other people in the industry to help their dancers with their career skills so that they could maybe set that aside from their list of demands and give that to somebody else who specialized in that. And I just knew as a dancer how helpful it would have been for me to have somebody who was really focused on that part of my career specifically, the mental side of it, the logistical side of it, everything that goes into pursuing a career behind the scenes.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I hear that a lot because in the clinic, we're working with a lot of those pre-professional dancers who are starting to think about next steps in their career, and especially like parents, if they're coming into appointments. And a lot of the parents especially do not come from a dance background, and they are just overwhelmed and don't even know where to start. Like it's not a traditional career path in that, you know, kind of how to get your foot in the door, how to start out in that career. And a lot of people, like I do hear it a lot, especially from parents, where they're saying, I wish there was more resources for knowing like what options are even out there. Like some of it is just the like, even knowing where to audition, what types of programs would be best suited for certain dancers and styles and what they're looking for. And so it's very overwhelming, not just from, like you said, the technical side of having to go in and perform on demand, but also like just all the logistics and all of that. I just want to like pop back to one thing you said. I love that your studio was really preparing you guys for auditions growing up, because I think that's something that we see sometimes in studios, but I don't see it as much now maybe as I used to. And I do know like when I was growing up, there was a little bit of that as well. We also did a lot of exams. And so sort of the mock exams and the preparing for exams was similar in the sense of we had to put the numbers on it, like all of that. But it just kind of triggered something that I was like, I actually don't know if I hear about that as much anymore. And I don't know if some of that is maybe because dancers are doing a lot more conventions. So they're maybe getting more opportunities where they're having more exposure to audition classes and stuff like in a convention setting. But I just wanted to like kind of touch back on that, because I think that's such a great thing that if there's teachers out there listening who want to, think about how do you prepare your dancers for auditions, that is something that you can absolutely implement in the studio pretty easily in terms of having, whether it's for actual roles like in the Nutcracker or even just doing a mock audition class for that experience and for that exposure for those dancers. So I really love that point that was like one of the experiences you had growing up.
Yeah, and our pre-professional ballet company that I was a part of, Michigan Ballet Theater, we would have auditions in the summer for the company, and our teacher would bring in outside adjudicators to judge us. And that's how we got placed if you were going to be a trainee, an apprentice, a company member within the company structure, because it was really structured like a professional ballet company. And so, yeah, again, like it gave us a lot of experience, but you were still within your studio and your comfort zone of where you took class every day. So it was definitely a nice transition to give us those skills, with still some of that comfort of home feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. You also touched on just like mentally finding auditioning more challenging than you had maybe expected. And I'm curious whether that is the biggest sort of, I don't want to say issue that you see with dancers, but maybe like the most common reason that dancers are having sort of like some stress or anxiety around auditions, if you feel like it is the mental piece that you see, or if it is dancers maybe more nervous about the physical part of the audition and what they're actually going to have to be able to perform.
I think it can be both, but even the physical side often tends to manifest mentally, because if you have something that you are uncomfortable with, if you're like, oh, turns are always tricky for me, I struggle with that, then you start to work yourself up even more in an audition because you know that that could be a difficult moment for you. And then mentally, it all starts to get more difficult across the board. So I think truly it is the mental side of things that dancers struggle with. And what I found personally was that as a kid going to summer intensive auditions, you're auditioning for these elite programs, and they're not necessarily like easy to get into. They are difficult, but if you're training at a certain level, you're going to get into most of the programs you want to. At least that's what I found. Like if you're in these pre-professional ballet settings already, these schools, you are paying them to go there. They are a business. And so they're accepting quite a few dancers. So I didn't get into every program that I wanted to, but I got into a good amount. I never had a summer where I was like, I have nowhere to go. I had options. I had scholarships. I had all the things. And even for college, it was a different experience, but still I felt confident in it. When I started going to company auditions, I would go into my first audition and I was cut like pretty quickly. And that's something that never happens in summer intensive auditions, even in college. Like, because part of it is just the experience of taking a full class and you're a student. So they want to give you that experience of being in the audition the entire time. College, they want you to learn more about their school, be in the setting. So those auditions, while not easy by any means, just felt different than the professional realm where now you're vying for maybe one spot. It's a paid position, hopefully, and they're making cuts quickly. You're seeing all these same people you keep seeing over and over again, and they're kind of psyching you out. And so the mental side definitely started to get more stressful for me in that period.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It is very different for like a company where people are getting cut even like before bar's over, or like you don't even get to complete the whole audition versus, like you said, in a summer intensive where they're maybe going to treat it a little bit like a masterclass opportunity. So they're going to keep everybody till the end, even if you might not get accepted to that program. So in those situations, do you have tips for how dancers, whether it's summer intensive or like these more professional auditions, but like kind of tips or strategies, or how do you coach dancers to sort of approach these situations knowing that they are how they are?
I think one of the biggest things I hear from dancers is the fear of the unknown. You go into your classes at your studio, or even when you go into a performance situation, it may be a stressful situation because you're on stage, it's live performance, but there are so many known factors. You've rehearsed this piece, you know what you're doing. Going into audition, you're in a new situation. Plus, you have a new teacher, combinations you're not used to. You don't know who's going to be there. Maybe the floor is slippery. Like there's so many different things that feel out of your control. And so one of the biggest things that I coach dancers on is coming back to what you can control in that moment. What can you do to make yourself feel in control as much as possible? And part of that is accepting that there are things out of your control and saying like, this is going to be a part of auditioning. This is a part of the process, and that's okay. Being a really good critical thinker. I think dancers are really well equipped to deal with situations out of our control. We do that all the time. Things happen in live performance. You have to think on your feet constantly. And so I like to remind dancers that they have those skills already. They know what to do when something goes wrong. And I think that's a really great opportunity. Like an audition, I think dancers can worry so much about, what if I make a mistake? What if I forget the combination? What if I fall? But that's actually a really beautiful opportunity to show how you deal with those moments, because any dancer knows that that's going to happen at some point in your career. So instead of letting that get you down and make you feel like, oh, I've just ruined my chances, use that opportunity to show the audition panel what you would do in that moment, how you would get back on the music, how you'd recover, because that can almost be more impressive than doing it perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also then comes back to like preparing for that. And so it's like practicing and putting yourselves in situations, whether it is just like a mock audition or just that experience of auditioning frequently, to put yourself in those situations where you have an opportunity to practice those skills, because it's easy to sort of say, okay, I'm going to think about controlling the controllables, but it is entirely different, as I'm sure you are well aware, of like actually being able to put that in practice and having sort of little strategies that you can come back to when you find yourself in that situation.
And that is the biggest thing I work with my dancers on. And I know when this episode's coming out, we're already in audition season. So some of this may not be as applicable right now, but thinking about future years, I work with my clients to start preparing for auditions in September. Like we are starting so early because it's stressful enough already. I don't want it to be more stressful. I want to alleviate as much of that as possible so they can go into it feeling as calm and prepared as they can. And so we're starting in September looking at, first of all, what do they want out of this audition season? What's their goal? What do they want to come out of it with? I mean, goals within their control and maybe out of their control. Like maybe you have the idea of, I want this contract, I want this ultimate job. And then also the things that are like, okay, how do I want to feel? I'll feel like I was successful if I come out of this audition season and I went into every audition and gave it my all and was fully present no matter what happens, right? Having those ideas in your mind of what you want to achieve. And then just from the logistical side too, like we're getting the videos and the resume and the pictures and everything done. My goal is always before Nutcracker and holiday season. Because once that hits, I feel like I see a lot of dancers just trying to jam it all in at that time of year. And by then you're already stressed. And it's sick season, right? You're already susceptible to getting sick. You need more sleep. You need more recovery time. You don't need to be staying up till 2 a.m. working on your audition video to send out on January 1st. So I really try to encourage dancers, if they can, to do that stuff really early. But if you haven't, like, that's okay. Still take it one step at a time, because you look at this monumental task of everything you have to do. And that is one of my biggest jobs as a career mentor, is helping dancers decide what's the next right thing we need to do. Instead of saying, I need to do 10 million different things, I'm freaking out, I'm just going to do nothing because I'm so overwhelmed and I'll just wait till the last minute and try to cram it all in. Okay, let's take it like each week we do 1 or 2 things. And then by the time we come to audition season, we're prepared. They feel calmer and they feel confident in their materials, because instead of just throwing it together last minute, like they've taken the time to really make sure it's the best representation of what they can do as a dancer. And also having time to think about like the skills they need to work on. Again, if they struggle with turning, if they struggle with picking up combinations quickly, okay, let's talk about this sooner so we can put a strategy in place to practice this, like you said, ahead of time. So when those moments come, you feel calmer, you feel more confident, you've done the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important part, or a point, to sort of just reiterate that the preparation for auditions does start, months and months and months ahead of time, or even, in the previous years, it's in that training, it's in that preparation. But then what can you do to put in place leading up to those actual audition dates? So that's great. Just to kind of, reiterate that point so people aren't sort of scrambling and then feeling panicked or less prepared or that type of thing. Mm-hmm. A couple questions for you that have come up a few times, and I, have my own opinions about them, but I'm curious your thoughts, because you're dealing with this much more on a day-to-day basis. But I often get asked by, again, mostly parents or families, what the kind of pros and cons are of going to an in-person audition versus submitting like a video audition. And just for a little bit of context, like I'm based in Vancouver in Canada. We do not get companies coming to Vancouver apart from our like Canadian summer intensives. So National Ballet, Royal Winnipeg, they will come to Vancouver. But for other companies and for American programs and things like that, the closest audition site is generally in Seattle. which requires crossing the border. And, it's not super far. It's about 3 hours. So it's not like out of the realm of possibility. So families are often trying to kind of weigh up the pros and cons of like, well, we could make this trip down to the States, or can't we just submit video? And so I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of pros and cons of in-person versus like video or kind of online submissions.
I think it comes down to capacity of the family and of the students. I do think in person is ideal, not just for your opportunity to be seen by the school or the company, but because you get an opportunity to be in their class as well and actually understand like what it would be like to be in that class or to be in that program or to have these teachers. And so it gives you a taste of what the vibe is. Even if you're not actually the actual site, even if they're traveling to your location, you're still meeting the teachers. Say it's a brand new style of dance you've never done before. If you can take a class in that style first, maybe you're like, this is really not for me, or maybe the vibe is totally off. So that's another mindset thing I tell dancers a lot is you're also auditioning them when you're going to audition. You're choosing them and they're as much as they're choosing you. So in person, that can give you that ability to be more in the driver's seat and have a really strong opinion about the program. You get to actually take a full class. But I do think videos are a great opportunity, and I'm really glad we have that ability to use that technology now. Like when I was a kid, I had to like send a DVD, like it was much harder. And so being able just to send a YouTube link, I think is incredible. And I think it's a great option. So I say, look at your list of companies or schools you're interested in. Choose the top ones. Well, first, actually, I would say, and then look at your calendar and say, okay, within the realm of possibility, how many weekends could we go to auditions without stressing the entire family out? Because I also realized like parents are not just a lot of times looking at their one kid's schedule. Maybe they have another kid in hockey, another kid in baseball. Like they have their own jobs. Like they have their work, their things they're doing. So looking at your entire family ecosystem, what can you potentially do without completely stressing the entire family out? And say, okay, we have 3 weekends that we could travel, and we'll commit to doing that. Time-wise, finances-wise, all the things. And then narrow it down to the schools that are the most important to you, that you're the most interested in. Go to those. If you can stack some on the same weekend, that's always great too. And especially for professional ballet company auditions, I always tell dancers, if you're traveling to a city for an open call, maybe look at companies that are around that area that you could drive to and see if you can get into a company class so that you can maximize that time. So anytime you're traveling, just try to maximize it as much as possible. And then from there, do what you can. From there, just send in videos, and that's totally fine as well. And I would just say for those situations, you want to do your research even more and talk to people even more to find out what you can about the program if you don't get to have that in-person vibe check.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if it is more of like a college program or a potential like company contract, as opposed to a summer intensive where I think a lot of people, they're going for the experience a bit more. And, it's a shorter duration. So maybe if it's not the absolute right fit, that's almost like an audition for a more full-time program anyway. But certainly if you're looking at a full-time program or a college program or something, that vibe check, I think, is really, really important. So, yeah.
And for summer intensives, I'm looking, if you're 12 years old and you're sending your kid away who's really young, like I'm looking at as much at the training as I am at the housing, the safety, the dining
the experience,
hall,
exactly.
the medical team on staff. Like I'm looking at all of that as a parent, because even if it's only 4 or 5 weeks only, that's a long time for a young kid and to be away from home. So you want to make sure that they're being taken care of as if they are a young kid. Yes, it's preparing them for professional life, but they are still a child. So make sure they're being nurtured as a child and being helped to grow in this profession, and not in a situation where it's going to cause them to burn out or worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point, because it's almost like looking at it, like sometimes I'll compare it to the idea of like sending your kid away to like summer camp or something. Like when they are that young, like it's not going to make or break their professional career when they're 12 years old. So you need to think of it as like, what is the entire experience. If you were sending them away, this is like their equivalent of going to some other like sleepaway camp. So looking at, what other extracurricular activities are there in the housing, like you said, so that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that comes up often, and probably the question I get like number one in the clinic in terms of audition seasons, is if dancers are dealing with injuries or have some sort of limitations during audition season. And so an example of this, and this is one that comes up a lot, is maybe a dancer sustained like an ankle sprain or something like that. And they're like recovering, but maybe they're not at the point where they can do point work yet. So they're like, well, I can do the vast majority of the audition class. They've been cleared. They're jumping, they're turning, they're doing everything, but they're not doing point work. I will often get asked, should I skip this audition? Should I still go and just tell them I can't do point work? Should I just go and just do the point work and suffer the consequences after? Like, how do you approach this? Because I think still in the dance world, there is this idea that we cannot admit that we have ever had an injury or recovering from an injury or addressing an injury. And so a lot of times people will say, well, I know that I'm not supposed to, or I'm not cleared to do XYZ yet, but I have an audition this weekend. So I'm just going to go and do that just for the audition. And then I'll start my rehab again. So I'm just wondering what you sort of like your approach is with dancers who maybe are not at 100% capacity when the audition comes around.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear your opinion on this too, as a medical professional, but my approach is, especially for summer intensive college auditions, still go in that scenario that you described where maybe you're just not cleared for point yet. Still go and yes, communicate that you cannot wear point shoes, but you have been on point, and you can note that on your resume, how many years you've been on points, and make sure that they know. Because sometimes I've been on the side where I'm an adjudicator and people aren't on points, and I don't know if they're just not on point yet or if they're injured. So as my point of view, I just need to know where they're at. And if I'm looking at a student, I can still tell their strength. Like, it's not going to make or break it for me if they can't wear their point shoes that day. And it is not worth getting injured to do an audition. So, and that's another reason why I do also encourage dancers to do their filming and that kind of thing early, because then you have a backup plan. Like, say you had planned, if at that point you're not injured, say October, you're not injured, you're feeling great. Then you do all your filming and then you plan to go to the auditions. You get injured during Nutcracker. Now you have a backup plan. You can send your video in instead if you need to. And you can even offer that up. Like, say you can go to the audition and not wear your point shoes. You can say, I'd be happy to email my video over where I'm wearing point shoes if they want to see that. I think for companies, it's a little bit trickier because you're typically doing the whole audition on point. So they really do want to see that. So it can be a little trickier. And I almost in that situation would reach out to the company before you go and ask what their thoughts are on you coming to audition, because it's just so competitive. Not being able to do that you may travel and them just say, well, if we can't see you on point, we can't offer you a job today. So it's just better to ask in that situation. And I think it's fine to ask in any situation. Communication is key. And I feel like as a dancer, I know how hard it is, especially when you're like a young dancer and you're in this room, it's overwhelming. All these adults are there who are maybe big names in the dance world. And you're just like, it feels hard to go up and talk to them and just say that, but they want you to communicate. They want you to tell them what's going on. Don't be scared to just say, hey, I can't do this. Never sacrifice yourself, your health for an audition. And if they ask you to, that's a huge red flag. Like if they're like, well, sorry, put your point shoes on or you're cut, then I would say, okay, I'm cut. Like I'm not going to dance here if that's how you're going to treat me in an audition, because, who knows what it's going to be like in an actual setting when I'm here. So I don't want to be any part of that as a dancer. So I think that's something to really consider too, is that could be a big red flag.
Absolutely. And that's such an important part to reiterate. It's like, yeah, that's just giving you a snippet of what their approach to a dancer health and wellness might be if they are sort of asking you to sacrifice things. Yes, that is like spot on sort of the advice that I give my dancers as well, in terms of like, I do think the communication is key. So I will always recommend that they just send a quick note ahead of time, especially if, again, a summer intensive type audition, send a note ahead of time and say, hey, this is like what I'm dealing with. Like, I can come, I just can't do the point part. And then, like you said, I will always suggest that they say, but I also have like video of, maybe it's like them doing a variation on a YAGP previously or whatever it is, but just to say, hey, if you would like any sort of like video evidence, it's not the right word, but like footage of me, doing point work or doing jumps or whatever the limitation is that dancer has, then oftentimes I will say like, communicate with them ahead of time, because I do think it's really hard, especially for younger dancers. If it's like a summer intensive audition, I think it's hard for dancers to walk up to the person at the front of the room in an audition setting, like come in the door and say like, hey, by the way, I'm here, but I can't do this. So I always sort of say, communicate ahead of time. And, if it is truly going to be a problem, then they're going to tell you that ahead of time in an email, and then you're not wasting your time going. But I've never had it be an issue. I will also, just as like a physiotherapist, I will always offer to like write a note, like kind of like a medical note that the family can send along as well. And sometimes I think they get asked for it, and sometimes I don't know that the program is really that bothered by having sort of like evidence or whatever. But I do think it helps if you're like, very forthcoming with it and saying, this is what's going on. This is my limitation. Here's my note from my physical therapist. Like, this is the timeline that I'm going to be able to be fully, cleared to dance, because I think that's also important for the program to know that, this is like something that you're recovering from, and that those limitations are probably only going to last another few weeks or maybe another month. So by the time the actual program rolls around, you will be fine. I would say exactly like you said, really communicating as transparently as possible so that it is not that weird, like, why isn't this person doing point work? Have they, not ever done point before? Are they injured? What's kind of happening in that situation? And then in terms of professional contracts, exactly like you said, I'd reach out ahead of time. And I've had a couple of instances where dancers have done that, and they've been invited to come at a later date and just take company class. So maybe they missed the open audition, but if it is a company that they're really interested in, and maybe they've sent in a little bit of like video footage, the company will often say, okay, let us know when you're recovered and we can arrange for you to come and take company class if there's still a position open and stuff. So again, even the companies, like, I think, yes, they want to see you at 100%, but they will often make alternate arrangements for that to be a possibility. So like you said, I would not sacrifice your body for the sake of one audition for sure.
Yeah, never.
Awesome. Just like, we've talked a lot about sort of preparing for auditions ahead of time in terms of, working on like the mental side of it and preparing videos and all of that. Do you have any kind of tips or suggestions or things that you help dancers work on in terms of like surviving or thriving like during audition season? So it gets hectic. It, becomes this like racing from one thing to another week after week, and then balancing, acceptance letters, rejection letters, all of that kind of thing. Like, do you have specific strategies that you use to help dancers manage like in the midst of the chaos of actual audition season?
Step away from the email. Stop checking it over and over again. I tell you this all the time. Like, you just have to get out and do something else. If you're constantly refreshing, if you find yourself just kind of freaking out about the answers coming in, just do something totally different. And that's advice I give dancers constantly throughout the year when they're in a really stressful period. You have to give not just your body a break, but your brain a break. Your brain needs a break from constantly thinking about dance. And I know we love it. As dancers, it's really hard to shut it off. I mean, I've been retired now for 7, 8 years, and I'm still thinking about dance all the time because I love it so much. But I find, and I know this to be a fact, that I do better work in the studio when I take time away from the studio to do other things. I know I'm more focused. I know I'm more excited to be there. And I know the mental part affects my physical body too. So the biggest thing I tell dancers in this period is just to like keep reassessing and keep figuring out what you need to do for yourself to be able to get through this, because it is a long period of time. It's really a marathon. And then once you go through auditions, like you're not done. Now you got summer intensives, and then you have another season starting. There is no down period for dancers. And that's something that's really hard compared to other sports. So you have to make that happen for yourself, because there will always be something you could be doing. So sometimes you just have to say, I can't do one more thing. And also, like, you can reassess throughout the season, because sometimes we'll say you have your calendar of things that you, like we said earlier, that you're going to go to. And you may get a month in and go, okay, I'm exhausted, and I can tell I'm getting toward maybe an injury, illness. Like, you can tell when your body's in that place where it's really susceptible, right? So, okay, let me reassess. I was planning to go to these auditions. Should I try to take one off? Like, you don't have to, your plan can change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just keep looking at your schedule and just don't like be like, oh, I said I was going to do this and I'm not fully committed if I don't do it. That's not true. You can change your mind.
Yeah. Permission to change your mind for sure. That's so, so helpful. And I think the listeners will find this really helpful in terms of both thinking about preparing for audition season, but also trying to survive and thrive during audition season. Is there anything that we have not touched on in terms of things that you think are really like key kind of takeaways for dancers going into, or really this episode's going to come out kind of right in the throes of audition season. So anything that you want to leave the listeners with?
Just to remember that rejection is a really normal part of a dance career. And when you look at someone's bio, even the most famous dancer, think of the most famous dancer that you love, that you have the poster on your wall that you're like, if I could just dance like them. They have been rejected many times. I promise you. Every single dancer has. And so when you get the rejections, it's hard. I know, like, it doesn't feel good. Yeah. But it's really normal, and you're not a bad dancer, or you're not cut out for this career because you got rejected. You are in a very competitive, challenging career, and all it means is you haven't found the right place for you yet. But I truly believe there is the right place for every dancer out there, and it just takes some finessing and a lot of work and a lot of auditions to find it sometimes. So you might have to go through 100 no's so you get your yes. But if you're passionate about this, and if this is something that you really care about and that you want to pursue, please just keep going, because the dancers who keep going are the ones who make it.
Absolutely. It's such an important message and an important reminder, because I think it is so easy to get discouraged when you get the no's, but you're going to get far more no's than you are ever going to get yeses. And like you said, that doesn't define you as a dancer, does not define your career. This has been such an amazing conversation. I know we could probably chat forever, but I will let you go. But before we do, how can listeners connect with you, or if listeners want to learn more or work with you, what is the best way to reach out?
Yeah, everything is at the Brainy Ballerina. So on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Brainy Ballerina. My website is thebrainyballerina.com. And I do have a whole suite of audition products. I have the Ultimate Audition Guide. Truly is everything that I could possibly think of from all of my years of experience auditioning. So that is like your one-stop shop for all the answers that you cannot find, or that you're like Googling in the middle of the night trying to figure out. It's in there. And then I also offer more one-on-one services for mentoring if you need support. I do audition materials audits if you want someone to look at your materials and give you some feedback. It's all on my website. So please reach out if you have any questions about what would be most helpful for you in this period, or what you could really benefit from.
Amazing. And I will link those resources in the show notes as well. So if anybody wants to go and find them there, they will be there. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I know the audience is going to find this super valuable and really helpful just to hear a little bit more about like the sort of ins and outs of the audition process. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. And thank you to everybody who is listening. I appreciate your support and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.